When the security team's SUVs blocked my driveway that morning, I thought it was a mistake. Turns out, the neighboring community had decided my land was theirs to control. They weren't ready for what happened next. I never thought buying my dream house would turn into a nightmare. The property was everything I wanted: 5 acres of beautiful land with tall pine trees, a small pond, and enough space to finally have the peace I'd been searching for. After 15 years of living in cramped city apartments, this felt like paradise. The real estate agent had smiled when she handed me the keys, telling me I'd found a real gem. If only we had known what was coming. The first few months were perfect. I spent weekends exploring my land, planning where to plant a garden, and enjoying morning coffee on my wraparound porch. The nearest neighbor was about half a mile away, and the only sounds were birds singing and leaves rustling in the breeze. I even started making friends with the locals. Old Mr. Johnson, who owned the farm down the road, would wave whenever he drove past, and Sarah from the local grocery store always had friendly gossip to share. That all changed the day I noticed the black SUV. It was parked at the edge of my property, just sitting there with tinted windows. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe someone had pulled over to take a phone call. But then it came back the next day and the day after that. Always in the same spot, always watching. Something didn't feel right. One morning, I decided to find out what was going on. I walked down my long driveway toward the SUV, ready to ask what they wanted. As I got closer, the driver's window rolled down, revealing a man in what looked like a security uniform. He had a stern expression and a badge that read Pine Valley Security. I had never heard of Pine Valley before. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound friendly despite my growing unease. The man looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe. "This area is under Pine Valley Community Surveillance," he said, his voice cold and professional. "We've noticed several violations on your property that need to be addressed." I stood there, confused. Pine Valley? That was the luxury gated community about 2 miles down the road. I had driven past their fancy entrance a few times, always wondering who lived behind those tall stone walls. "I think there's been a mistake," I said. "I'm not part of Pine Valley. This is private property." The security officer's face didn't change. He pulled out a tablet and started reading from it. Unauthorized structures near the property line. Improper fencing. Unapproved landscaping changes. He looked up at me. "These all violate Pine Valley community guidelines." I felt anger rising in my chest. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't Pine Valley property. I own this land. You have no right to be here." The officer just smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that said he knew something I didn't. "Pine Valley is expanding its security zone," he explained, like he was talking to a child. "Your property falls within our new patrol area. You'll be receiving official notice soon." Before I could argue, he rolled up his window and drove away, leaving me standing in my driveway, speechless. True to his word, the letters started arriving the next day. Official-looking envelopes with the Pine Valley logo, filled with pages of rules, regulations, and demands. They wanted me to submit plans for any changes to my property. They claimed the right to approve my landscaping choices. They even demanded access to my land for their security teams to conduct regular patrols. I took the letters to Mr. Johnson, hoping he could make sense of them. He read them slowly, his weathered face growing darker with each page. "Been wondering when they'd try this again," he said finally. "Pine Valley's been pushing their boundaries for years. They tried the same thing with the Hendersons last spring. Wanted to force them to join their community, follow their rules. But they can't do that, can they?" I asked. Mr. Johnson shook his head. "Legally? But they've got money influence. They think they can bully folks into giving in." He handed the letters back to me. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" I found out what he meant the next morning. 3 Pine Valley security SUVs were parked across my driveway when I tried to leave for work. The same officer from before stood in front of them, along with 4 others. They all wore the same dark uniforms, the same cold expressions. "This property is now under Pine Valley jurisdiction," the lead officer announced. "We'll need you to sign these compliance forms." Looking at those security officers blocking my path, I realized this was just the beginning. They thought they could intimidate me into submission, force me to bow to their rules. They thought I would be an easy target, just another property to add to their expanding empire. But as I stood there that morning, watching them try to take control of my dream home, something inside me changed. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and they were about to find out that some people don't scare so easily. The battle for my property was about to begin, and Pine Valley Security was going to learn a hard lesson about picking the wrong person to bully. I could lose everything I'd worked for, or I could stand my ground and fight. Looking back now, I realize that morning was when everything truly started, the moment I decided to take on Pine Valley and their private army of wannabe cops. And believe me, what happened next would shake their perfect little community to its core. The security patrols became relentless after that first confrontation. Every morning, I'd wake up to find Pine Valley's SUVs circling my property like sharks. They took photos of everything: my garden, my tools in the yard, even my parked car. At night, their flashlights would sweep across my windows, a constant reminder that they were watching. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Their tactics got more aggressive with each passing day. One morning, I found orange cones blocking the dirt path I used to reach the back of my property. A security officer appeared out of nowhere when I tried to move them. "This access point has been deemed unsafe by Pine Valley standards," he said, writing something in his notebook. "You'll need to submit a formal request for approved access routes." I started documenting everything. My phone became full of videos and photos: security vehicles parked illegally on my land, officers trespassing, every single interaction. Sarah from the grocery store put me in touch with the Hendersons, the family Mr. Johnson had mentioned. They'd gone through the same nightmare 6 months earlier. "They'll try to wear you down," Mrs. Henderson warned me over coffee at her kitchen table. "That's their strategy. They have money and time. They think everyone will eventually give up." The Henderson story was eye-opening. Pine Valley had started with the same security patrols, then escalated to daily fines and threats of legal action. The community board had tried to force them to sell their property at half its value. "They want to build a golf course," Mr. Henderson explained. "Our land, your land, it's all part of their expansion plan. They've been buying up properties for years." Research revealed a disturbing pattern. Pine Valley wasn't just an exclusive community, it was a machine designed to swallow up surrounding properties. They'd successfully pressured 5 other families into selling in the past 3 years. Their tactics were always the same: constant surveillance, harassment disguised as security concerns, and a flood of threatening letters and fines. Those letters kept coming, each one more threatening than the last. They claimed I owed thousands in fines for violations of their community standards. They demanded I remove my garden because it didn't match their approved landscaping plan. One letter even tried to claim my property had, accidentally, been included in their original community charter, suggesting I had been part of Pine Valley all along. The security team's behavior grew bolder. They started stopping my visitors at the end of my driveway, demanding identification and reason for visit. My friend Tom, coming over to help with some yard work, was turned away by officers claiming he didn't have proper contractor credentials. When I confronted them, they simply said they were ensuring community safety standards. Then came the signs. I returned home from work one evening to find Pine Valley community signs hammered into my front lawn. "Property under community protection," they read, with the Pine Valley logo prominently displayed. The security officer parked nearby just smiled when I started pulling them out. "Those are official community markers," he said. "Removing them will result in additional fines." Things reached a boiling point when they tried to prevent my weekly grocery delivery. 2 security vehicles blocked the delivery truck, claiming unauthorized commercial vehicles weren't allowed in the community. I had to carry my groceries box by box from the main road, past their smirking faces. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by Pine Valley's threatening letters, my hands shaking with anger and frustration. The next morning, I found an official-looking document taped to my front door. It was an official notice of community incorporation from Pine Valley. They were trying to formally annex my property into their community, complete with a list of fees and assessments I would be required to pay. The total came to more than my yearly salary. What made it worse was discovering I wasn't alone. Other neighbors started reaching out, sharing similar stories. The Patels, who owned 20 acres on the other side of Pine Valley, had been fighting off their security patrols for weeks. The old Miller farm was under constant surveillance. It was all part of a bigger plan. Pine Valley wasn't just expanding, they were trying to take over the entire area. I called a community meeting at Mr. Johnson's barn. 15 families showed up, all with their own Pine Valley horror stories. Some had already given in, signing away their property rights just to escape the harassment. Others were still fighting, but their resources were running low. The security team had spotted our meeting, 3 SUVs parked outside the barn, officers taking photos of our cars and writing down license plate numbers. As I stood in that barn, listening to my neighbors' stories and watching the security teams through the windows, I realized this had become bigger than just protecting my own property. Pine Valley's board thought they could bully and intimidate their way into owning everything around them. They thought their money and power made them unstoppable. Looking at the tired, angry faces of my neighbors, I knew we had to do something. Pine Valley's security team might have their fancy uniforms and SUVs, but we had something stronger: desperation and determination. They wanted a fight? We would give them one they wouldn't forget. The question was, how far would they go to stop us, and what would it cost us to stand our ground? My first step in fighting back was turning my property into a digital fortress. I installed security cameras covering every inch of my land, with backup power systems and cloud storage to record everything. Pine Valley's security team didn't like being filmed. Their threatening smiles disappeared when they realized their every move was being documented. Working late one night, I discovered something interesting while researching Pine Valley's history. Their community board had tried similar tactics before in another county, but had been forced to back down after legal challenges. More importantly, I found out their security team wasn't actually licensed to operate outside their official community boundaries. They were essentially playing dress-up as law enforcement. The local news stations were surprisingly interested when I reached out. A small community's private security force trying to annex surrounding properties? It made for great headlines. The first news van showed up on a Tuesday morning, right as Pine Valley's security team was placing more unauthorized signs on my property. The officers scattered like roaches when the cameras started rolling. Our neighborhood resistance grew stronger. Mr. Johnson's barn became our unofficial headquarters. We formed a homeowners alliance, pooling our resources and sharing information. The Patel's teenage daughters set up a website documenting Pine Valley's harassment. Someone even started flying a drone over Pine Valley itself, recording their security team's movements. Pine Valley's board wasn't happy about the attention. Their first response was to double down: more security patrols, more threatening letters. But now we were ready. Every letter was forwarded to our lawyers. Every interaction was recorded. Every trespass was documented. We weren't just defending ourselves anymore, we were building a case. The security team's frustration showed in their increasingly aggressive behavior. They tried parking their vehicles to block my driveway completely one morning. When I called the real police, the officers suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere. Another time, they followed my car all the way to work, claiming they were ensuring community safety standards were maintained outside the residential zone. Things got uglier when they realized intimidation wasn't working. One night, I caught them trying to sabotage my security cameras. The next day, my water pressure mysteriously dropped to nothing. A quick check revealed someone had tampered with my well pump controls. The security team just happened to be parked nearby, watching. "Shame about your water problems," one officer said, smirking. "Pine Valley residents never have such issues." Our alliance struck back strategically. We discovered Pine Valley's board members owned several local businesses. A coordinated boycott hit them where it hurt: their wallets. Anonymous tips to county regulators triggered investigations into their water usage and zoning compliance. Suddenly, Pine Valley had their own problems to worry about. The media coverage intensified. More homeowners came forward with similar stories from other communities. Pine Valley's tactics weren't unique. Private communities across the country were trying to forcefully expand their territories. Our fight was becoming part of a larger story about property rights and community overreach. One rainy morning, things reached a breaking point. I woke up to find Pine Valley's entire security force, 6 SUVs and 12 officers, lined up at my property line. Their lead officer handed me an ultimatum: sign their community integration agreement or face immediate enforcement action. When I refused, they started advancing onto my property in a line, like some kind of amateur military operation. What they didn't expect was the crowd of neighbors who emerged from behind my house. 30 families, all holding phones and cameras, recording everything. 2 news crews arrived minutes later, their cameras capturing Pine Valley's security team attempting to intimidate a group of peaceful homeowners. The officers retreated quickly, but the damage to their reputation was done. The videos went viral. Pine Valley became social media famous for all the wrong reasons. Their carefully maintained image of an exclusive, luxury community crumbled as people shared stories of their aggressive expansion tactics. Potential home buyers started backing out of deals. Their property values took a hit. We discovered more allies in unexpected places. Former Pine Valley employees came forward with stories of being ordered to harass neighboring properties. Local government officials, previously friendly to Pine Valley's board, suddenly became very interested in reviewing their security team's licenses and permits. The wall of power they'd built started showing cracks. Our lawyers found a crucial weakness in Pine Valley's strategy. Their security team had been operating far outside their legal jurisdiction, essentially impersonating law enforcement. Every fine they'd issued, every threat they'd made, every act of harassment, all of it was illegal. We had them cornered and they knew it. The security patrols started disappearing. First one SUV, then another, until only a single vehicle remained, parked far from my property. The threatening letters stopped coming. Pine Valley's board members stopped responding to media inquiries. Something was changing behind those fancy gates. But we knew better than to celebrate too early. Pine Valley's board had too much money and pride invested in their expansion plans to give up easily. They were just regrouping, planning their next move. The question was, what would desperate, wealthy people do when their power was threatened? As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the last Pine Valley security SUV drive away, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. We'd won the first real battle, but the war wasn't over. The next phase would be fought in courtrooms and corporate boardrooms. They had money and connections on their side. All we had was the truth, carefully documented and ready to be revealed. Sometimes, though, the truth is the most powerful weapon of all. The legal battle that followed was unlike anything our small community had ever seen. Pine Valley's board hired 3 separate law firms, their expensive lawyers filling the courthouse with designer suits and leather briefcases. Our side looked modest in comparison, just 2 local attorneys who believed in our cause, backed by a community that refused to be bullied. The evidence we'd gathered proved devastating. Hundreds of hours of video footage showed Pine Valley's security team trespassing, harassing residents, and impersonating law enforcement. Their own letters and documents revealed a calculated plan to force neighboring properties into their community. Former security officers testified about being ordered to intimidate homeowners through constant surveillance and bogus violations. But our biggest break came from an unexpected source. A former Pine Valley board member, feeling guilty about their tactics, provided emails showing the board knew their actions were illegal. They had deliberately targeted properties they wanted for expansion, using their security team to make owners' lives miserable until they gave in and sold. Our small community lawsuit suddenly became a state investigation into real estate fraud. The courtroom fell silent when their detailed expansion plans were revealed. Maps showed how they planned to double their territory, swallowing up family farms and private homes to build golf courses and luxury condos. They had even drafted fake documents claiming their community boundaries had always included our properties, planning to use these to challenge our deeds in court. Pine Valley's lawyers tried every trick to discredit us. They claimed we were conspiracy theorists, troublemakers fighting against community improvements. But they couldn't explain away their own documents, their own words caught on camera, their own security team's illegal actions. Each day brought new revelations about their tactics, and each revelation brought more attention to our case. Local officials, embarrassed by their previous support of Pine Valley, launched their own investigation. The security team's licenses were suspended pending review. County regulators discovered years of zoning violations inside Pine Valley itself. The perfect facade of the luxury community started crumbling, revealing the corruption beneath. The judge's decision came after 3 weeks of testimony. His words still ring in my ears. This court finds Pine Valley Community Board's actions not only illegal but a gross abuse of power and property rights. The security team was ordered to cease all operations outside Pine Valley's original boundaries. The board was forced to pay substantial damages to every homeowner they had harassed. But the real victory came in the changes that followed. New state laws were passed preventing private communities from expanding without proper oversight. Security teams were banned from operating outside their designated areas. Pine Valley's board members resigned in disgrace, replaced by residents who wanted to repair relationships with neighboring properties. The media called it a victory for property rights, a classic David versus Goliath story. But for those of us who lived through it, it was simply about protecting our homes and standing up to bullies. The thousands of dollars in damages couldn't make up for months of harassment and sleepless nights, but knowing we had stopped them from doing this to others made it worthwhile. My property feels different now. The towering pine trees and quiet mornings are still there, but they mean more somehow. Every morning, I walk my property line, not looking for security vehicles anymore, but appreciating the peace we fought so hard to protect. That no trespassing signs have been replaced with gardens. The security cameras remain, but they rarely record anything more exciting than deer visiting my pond. The neighborhood has changed too. Our alliance, formed in crisis, grew into a true community. We have monthly gatherings at Mr. Johnson's barn, sharing food and stories instead of legal strategies. The Patel's daughter turned our website into a resource for other communities facing similar battles. Even some Pine Valley residents, embarrassed by their board's actions, have become friends. Sometimes, late at night, I think about how close we came to losing everything. Not just our properties, but our right to live peacefully in our own homes. Pine Valley's board had counted on our isolation, thinking we would be easy targets fighting alone. They never expected us to unite, to stand together against their high-priced lawyers and private security force. The last Pine Valley security SUV was sold at auction last month. I watched it drive away, its Pine Valley logos painted over, just another used vehicle now. The sight brought back memories of those dark days when those vehicles seemed to be everywhere, their presence a constant threat. Now they're gone, and the only patrols on my property are the ones I take myself, enjoying the land I fought to protect. Last week, a young family bought one of the properties Pine Valley had targeted. As I helped them move in, the father asked about the story he'd heard, about our fight against the powerful community next door. Looking at his children playing in the yard their parents had just bought, I felt proud of what we'd accomplished. We learned something important, I told him. When regular people stand together, even the most powerful bullies can be stopped. The setting sun still paints my property in beautiful colors every evening. But now, instead of security cameras recording the scene, neighbors often gather on my porch to watch it together. We talk about normal things, gardens and weather, local gossip and future plans. Pine Valley sits quietly behind its gates, its expansion dreams dead, its power to intimidate broken forever. In the end, they helped create exactly what they tried to destroy, a real community, bound together not by rules and security patrols, but by the bonds forged in standing up for what's right.